Good evening, and welcome to the primetime edition of Expose Yourself to Art, the show that plumbs the depths of the creative experience by inviting artists to come in and talk with us about their life and their art. As usual, I'm joined by my co-host, Linda Scheller. You there, Linda? Come on in and say hi. There you are.
Good. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, I wasn't able to make the last show, and you did it by yourself. I heard it went very well.
Oh, thank you. I had a great time. It was wonderful talking with Sandra.
Yeah, that's what I heard. The big question, though, is did you miss me?
Oh, gosh, David, of course.
Oh, of course.
But we managed.
I had a friend, when I asked that question, he said, were you on the show? Are you on that show? Whatever. Anyway, so when I was playing tennis today, a thought occurred to me that throughout my life, there's been two main forces. One is the arts, and the other is sports. And I don't know if that's a common combination or a unique combination, but what about with you? Does sports ever play a part in your life? I know you're a poet, artist, and
Yeah, well, I was a tomboy growing up. I loved climbing trees and riding bikes and just, running around on the riverbank in the woods. But in high school, they added girls' soccer, and I thought I'd give that a try and absolutely loved it. So fortunately, when I moved to Modesto, they just started up the co-rec league. So I began playing and played co-rec soccer for more than 20 years, coached then.
wow.
I think it was like 41 when I stopped playing. And then I started coaching because I wanted to coach my children's teams. And then I ended up coaching junior high and high school teams after my children decided they didn't want to do this anymore. Now I just like watching it, but that and hiking. So, yeah.
So that was a big part of your life.
Oh, yeah. I loved it. I still love it.
So those two parts of your life, your creative side and your athletic side, they went together quite well.
And you too, I guess.
Yeah. So, when I was thinking about it, I was reminded of something that I talked about when I was very young. I played a lot of sports, baseball, football, and I actually was drawing back then. And one day after a baseball game, one of my friends said, so have you ever thought about what you're going to do when you grow up? And I said, well, of course, I'm going to be a professional baseball player in the summertime, and I'm going to be a professional football player in the fall.
Oh.
And he said, but this is way in the dark ages. Professional athletes weren't paid a lot then. And he said, can you actually make a living doing that? And I said, gee, I don't know. I said, maybe I'll just become an artist, and that's how I'll make my money.
Ever practical.
But several years later, when I entered adolescence, reality hit me. And it was like, oh, yes, there's a world out there that, and art is not one of those that's going to make it for me as far as money. So anyway, but let's get on with the show. Today's guest is Ken White, a local writer, very talented man. I've heard about him many, many ways. So let me just give you a few introductory remarks. Ken White retired from the worlds of advertising, corporate communications, and interactive entertainment to concentrate on writing and community service. Born in Lathrop and raised in Modesto, California, he continues to live in his hometown. He is married to Robin and has two adult stepsons, Tyler and Eric. He has written novels, screenplays, short stories, stage plays, children's and nonfiction books. Most of his stories are about his hometown and the Central Valley heartland. Wow, that's impressive. Come on in. Ken, where are you? There you are. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's quite a resume. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Being
I've
a
had some
writer-
years to work on it.
Yeah. Something occurred to me just a little while ago too, that most of the people in the arts have been hit pretty hard by the pandemic, especially in the performing arts areas. And so I was curious as to how, if and how the pandemic has affected you as a writer.
Well, my routine hasn't changed that much due to the pandemic. I mean, I've spent most of my time at the computer writing or communicating with people, sending out messages about various things going on in town. So my daily routine didn't change that much. Although things that did change were we had a couple of projects that we were working on, a couple of stage plays that we had planned to do staged readings of. And of course, those we couldn't do. So I could sympathize with people who had projects either in music or the performing arts or at the Midland Gallery that just couldn't go forward because of the quarantine. So I sympathize with folks like that. A couple of things that we have done to sort of work around that is I got involved with the State Theater, and they're doing virtual seminars on various film projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was involved with the discussion on American Graffiti. And then I will be working with Arnold Schmidt on an upcoming one next year on the films of John Ford and John Wayne. So those kinds of things have been going on. I've also been involved in organizing a few virtual reunions. My class of 66, Davis High School, will be having its 55th reunion next year. And so in anticipation of that, I organized a virtual reunion. And we ended up with about 30 people from all the way from Taiwan to California to Pennsylvania to New Mexico, all sort of setting in and getting caught up. And it went so well, we're going to do another one in November, and we may end up doing it on a monthly basis.
Wow.
So things like that. I've also been taking classes virtually, one of which is one called Creative Aging, which is being taught by Barbara Doran, who was a classmate of mine, pretty much from 7th grade on. And she's in Santa Fe. And so she's teaching it virtually. So I've been doing that, taking a drawing class. Been staying busy that way. And I've also found that there are some very interesting and inventive ways of telling stories that have been happening as a result of the pandemic. People are sort of forced to rethink how they can communicate. And so that's been fun to watch.
Right. Some very creative things have come out of it. Well, I understand that you've had an interview in the past with our co-host Linda. So you two are probably very comfortable with talking about you. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and we're going to get some background on you and your development. So take it away, Linda.
Thanks. Yeah, Ken, could you tell us a bit about growing up and early artistic influences?
So some of it was covered in the bio. Born in Lathrop, moved to Modesto when I was 2, went all through school here in town, several elementary schools, because that was when the baby boomers were all appearing, and they kept opening up brand new elementary schools. So I went to Washington, Inslin, Beard, and ended up at Garrison. And then went to Roosevelt and then Davis High, third graduating class at Davis High, and then on to Modesto Junior College, then UC Davis, San Francisco State, and then I lived in the Bay Area for years, and then moved to Hawaii for a couple of years, and then came back home to Modesto. So most of my stories, as it said in the bio, are about the Central Valley. And I was an avid reader. I really enjoyed reading and read when I wasn't picking on my siblings and playing sports. And at Garrison, I had a great teacher in the 5th grade. His name was Jack Leach. And he started a book club. And it was kind of a competitive thing, and I was a competitive kid. And it was always who could read the most books and write the most book reports on a weekly basis. And so that got me into reading quite a bit. And then when I went to college, I didn't write normal reports or essays. I tended to try to tell a story. And that's kind of where all of that started. And then once I graduated and got out into the professional world, working in corporate communications and advertising, same thing there. It was always about telling a story, whether it was a training film about safety for Bechtel Corporation, or introducing a new wine for Gallo, or a new pair of jeans for Levi Strauss. It was always about telling a story. So that really was sort of my passion, was doing that. And at the same time, I had a love of music. My family all played music. And so early on, I got into songwriting with my best friend, George Rogers, and my younger brother, Wendell. And so that was always something I did as well. So it was always about telling stories.
At what point did you decide you were going to be a really serious writer?
When I decided to retire from doing the day-to-day.
Yeah.
When I thought, okay, I'm going to retire now. I'm not going to do any more projects, and I'm going to seriously concentrate on writing, refining my craft, getting it published, and getting it marketed. And it really did take retiring to be able to do that, to concentrate on making those things happen. So once I retired and got serious about it, things started to happen, and things started to get published, and I started to get some notice from folks, and started to network in a much more serious way.
What is your writing routine like?
It's pretty, I guess, rigid. I'm not known for my flexibility, I don't think. I'm up at 6 o'clock, checking emails. 7 o'clock, I start writing. And that's either researching a new project, rewriting an existing project, starting another project, marketing, sending out emails about projects, about events coming up. And then at noon, I'll go for a bike ride to sort of clear the brain cells out. And then I'll come back, and from 1 to 3, I'll either have meetings or do some phone calling. And then 3 o'clock, I go out and run some errands and take care of some other things. But that's pretty much the routine, Monday through Friday. I try not to vary it, because routine makes a difference. It helps you get things done and keep focused on the task at hand.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned that all of this focus on writing happened after you retired. Did you retire early or late?
So I retired at 65, and I turned 72 on October 5th, just a couple of weeks ago. So been basically working seriously at it for about 7 years. But I had started working on some things before that. In fact, one of the things about the pandemic is that it allowed me to go into the drawers and pull out some projects that I had left sitting for a number of years. And one of them was a novel I wrote called Tyranny of the Downbeat, about the politics of water in California. And I wrote it back in 1988, and then just put it away. And I dug it out back in March, and it actually held up. And so I may be considering getting that published next year. So I've been dabbling with things, writing down ideas, little snippets of things for years and years, and storing them away. And then finally started putting them together. In fact, one of the first books I got published was Getaway Day. And I had that idea for that book, oh goodness, probably since 1982 maybe. We're just sort of thinking, this could be a great, because I love baseball. So I thought this could be a great story. So I started jotting down notes and trying to figure out how I could tell the story. And then eventually it came together, and that book came out in 2014.
Do you work on one project at a time, or do you have two or more going?
And I'm multitasking. So right now, I am marketing a book that's coming out on November 1st. I am working on a stage play. I'm getting ready to publish a series of very short stories, probably in January. I'm working on some new songs. And so I'm juggling those all at the same time.
Ooh,
Yeah,
Wow.
impressive.
So,
it's not that hard for me.
Another quick question before we dig into some of the things you're doing. What kind of work did you do in the corporate world?
So I was in corporate communications.
Yeah.
My first job was with Bechtel Corporation. I got my master's degree in educational technology, which is using media to educate.
Oh,
And it was really a very early degree at San Francisco State. And I got hired out of there at Bechtel to run their video department as part of the public relations department. So I handled all of the video production for the public relations for Bechtel. And Bechtel was then and probably still is the world's largest construction management company. So we had lots of work to do. They built Hoover Dam, they built Alyeska Pipeline, they built BART. They do nothing but very large projects. And the interesting thing about them is they are family owned, and every one of their projects is privately financed because they've got a little bit of money. So as I say, I did all of their corporate communications, all of their video, did a lot of training, a lot of motivational programs, a lot of recruiting programs.
Right.
And then I left them and went freelance. And not long after that, started working for Levi Strauss and other companies in the Bay Area. And then when I moved back to Modesto, I started working for Gallo. So at any point in my career, I was working for the largest construction management company, the largest apparel manufacturer, and the largest winemaker in the world. Yeah. They were all fun companies.
It wasn't too big a jump then, because you've always been involved with communications.
Yes.
Yes.
Entire time.
So,
Whether it was media or writing,
Yeah.
it's always been some manner of communications. In fact, sort of cut my teeth very early on at Modesto Junior College. I can thank MJC for getting me started. I took a class called Reader's Theater, which some people may know about. And basically it's a staged reading, but you use music and visuals to help tell the story. And so I did a project for a Reader's Theater class, and I did all of the lighting, all of the selection of imagery, all of the production. And I said to myself, I like this because it combines a lot of things that I enjoy. It combines music, combines stage work, it combines photography, combines video, combines graphic design. So that's kind of where it really all started. And then when I was at San Francisco State, the Ed Tech program encouraged that. And then in between, when I was at UC Davis, George Rogers was there with me, and we did a Reader's Theater program on Tolstoy for a Russian class that I was taking. I was a Russian history, Russian literature, English literature, double major, double minor. And so as part of one of my Russian classes, Russian Lit, we gave this Reader's Theater presentation. And my professor, who was a very bright, innovative guy, said, I think I'd like to try something along these lines. I'd like to teach Russian using television. And he said, do you want to be involved? And I said, sure. Wow. So I went to work for the educational television department at UC Davis, walked into their studio, and basically they said, okay, here's the camera, here's the zoom, here's the focus. We're going to do a production in 5 minutes. And so I basically learned from the ground up all the production elements of doing that. And so I had a little bit of training before I ended up at Bechtel.
So did anyone ever call you multi-talented?
No.
No. Sounds like it. I'm sorry. It's just like, my goodness, you've done a lot of things. It's impressive. I'm impressed.
Well, I'm an inquisitive guy, so something gets my attention, I'll pursue it.
So, all these things, songwriting, stage plays, books, maybe it's time we take a look at some of these things.
Sure.
We brought some examples and pictures, and why don't we jump in and see what you've been doing?
All right.
Okay.
So Getaway Day, as I mentioned, was the first one I had published by a small publisher in Oklahoma. And basically the description for this one is, in 1962, a California teen learns of his dying father's dream to play catch with his idol, Yankee baseball legend Mickey Mantle. In a desperate race against time to fulfill his father's wish, the boy discovers more about life, growing up, and family than he ever imagined. And this actually is based on an actual event, if Linda would advance the next slide, that took place on October 14th, 1962 at Del Webb Field in Modesto. It was the 1962 World Series, Giants and Yankees, and it had been rained out in San Francisco, and the teams couldn't practice. Well, the Modesto Reds, they were called the Modesto Colts in 1962, were owned by a couple people that knew the owners of the Giants and the Yankees. And Del Webb Field was named after one of the current owners of the Yankees. So the ownership of the Reds called the Giants and said, hey, it's dry in Modesto. Come on over and practice. And they did. They put the teams on 2 buses, everybody except Willie Mays, who drove over in his Cadillac, and they practiced at Del Webb Field. And Del Webb held about 2,000 people, and there were 5,000 people there that day. And I was out in left field. I was there, and I could stick my finger through the chain link fence and poke one of, like Harvey Keene or somebody that was there. And so I made that the backdrop to the story. And the fact about my father's cancer was not actually true. That was fabrication, but it was actually based on the fact that later in life, my good friend George Rogers had cancer. And so I sort of based part of him on my father, and that was the storyline for that particular one. And if you advance to the next slide, you'll see 2 of the main players that were there that day. There were on the field 8 Hall of Famers playing that day. There was Mays and Mantle, McCovey, Maris, Whitey Ford, Yogi Berra, Don Larson, and I can't remember who the other one was. Anyway, there were 8 of them that all went on into the Hall of Fame. So then my next book, if Linda would bring up, actually it's one of the PDFs, Linda, should be that happiness thing. There you go. So the next one was a children's book that I wrote about Christmas. And it takes place in Modesto in 1958. And basically this one, the summary for this story, let's see if I can find it here, is basically that a young man finds out that his parents and his family aren't happy, and he can't figure out why. And so he decides to go out around town and talk to various people and things and objects and figure out what makes them happy. And after he goes on this tour and talks to all kinds of people, places, and things, and he gets home, he realizes that happiness is really home and family. And I worked on this book with a gentleman who's an artist in Turlock, Ron Wilkinson. And basically what we did is a kind of a unique style. Why don't you go ahead and advance one more there, Linda, the next PDF. So what we did is we took illustration and we put it over historical photographs. So this is a picture of the old McHenry Mansion, and in the foreground is a drawing of the main character with a magic snow globe that he uses to learn various things as he's on his journey. And so it was kind of a fun way to illustrate that particular book. And then if you move up to the next PDF, what I'd hoped to do at some point is to actually take a tour around downtown Modesto to all of these sites to show what was there then and what's there now, because we've lost a lot of these really wonderful old buildings. And so hopefully one day I'll be able to take that tour. And then the book that followed that was Brighter Day, which, there you go. Thank you, Linda. And that one came out fairly recently. And the description for that one is, as the tumultuous 60s come to a close, a California college student risks everything he cares about as he traffics with the lunatic fringe of radical politics and culture in his quest to make sense of a government he no longer trusts and a war he no longer believes in. And this book basically takes some of the same characters from Getaway Day, the protagonist and some of his friends, and moves them 7 years ahead to 1969. Many people call 1969 the year everything changed. And a lot of things happened that year.
A lot of things happened then, yeah.
Yeah. And where Getaway Day, the through line was baseball, in Brighter Day, the through line is music. In Getaway Day, I used headlines from the Modesto Bee to set up sort of what was going on in the world then. In Brighter Day, I use Rolling Stone magazine, all the news that fits. So that came out a couple years ago. And
Hey, I want to ask you a question quick, because I remember this. You wrote me an email and you said, how can I get a picture of the valley and the rising sun?
yes.
Where did you get this picture?
That ended up being a stock image that I found. And it works beautifully. I know. I checked with all of my photography friends and just couldn't find the right one. And I went out and took a few myself and just didn't quite capture what I was looking for. So I found that as a stock image. And then the image above it is actually a painting done by my brother Wendell. And then the guitar above that was actually a guitar that he owned when he was playing music. So there are some sentimental parts of the cover. But I thought, it looks like I probably won't be able to do that. We got to keep moving ahead here. I was going to read an excerpt, but it's a long one, so we'll just keep moving. So the next one then was the 12 Days of Central Valley Christmas. There you go. And I again did that one with Ron Wilkinson, and basically took the 12 Days of Christmas song and turned it into something that related to the valley. So if you advance to the next one, Linda, it went through all the songs. And so instead of 5 golden rings, it was 5 golden clings, peaches, that is.
Clever.
So we did that with that particular one, and that was great fun. And so those two books are actually part of a children's book, Christmas book trilogy. The third one is going to be 'Twas the Night Before Christmas in Modesto. And hopefully we'll get that one out fairly soon. And that's going to have sort of a 50s graffiti theme. And Ron will be doing the illustration on that one as well.
When can we expect that one?
And that one's out. So, the new one, I was hoping we're going to have it this year, but it didn't quite come together in time. So it'll probably be next year when we get that one done. It's been written and a couple of the roughs have been finished, but it got a little more work to do on that one. And then, so one of the books I'm working on right now is the next one, which is Counting on Christmas. And that's basically, let me see if I can find the description for that one. So basically the description for this one is, heartbroken when a precious holiday keepsake is stolen and her Christmas-themed business is threatened. A young woman who believes Christmas is the key to happiness learns life-changing lessons about love, family, community, and the true meaning of Christmas when she is visited by the ghosts of loved ones on Christmas Eve. And this is kind of a Hallmark story, as Charles Dickens might have written it or Frank Capra might have filmed it. And it's a novelette. It's a short one. And it's going to be out actually November 1st. So we'll have that one out soon. You can click up to the next one, Linda. That's the back cover that describes a little bit of the. So it's the key message is family is the one thing we take for granted when it's the one thing we should treasure most. And so the silver bell there is sort of a steal from It's a Wonderful Life, and it becomes a very important object in the story itself. So.
So what's the thinking behind the theme of these 3 books?
So just basically, I love Christmas, and really having to do with Christmas in the Central Valley.
Huh?
And so Counting on Christmas is also set in Modesto, and has there'll be quite a few things in there that people here in town will recognize. But it really is about Christmas in Modesto. And I was very fortunate that had parents and a family that really enjoyed Christmas, and we had a wonderful time. So that is the connecting theme there.
Sure.
And then the next book is one that you'll know about, David. The next one was Touchstones.
Oh, there it is. Yes.
And that was a book I was asked to write by the McHenry Museum, and it was in anticipation of the 150th anniversary, which we're celebrating this year, but we're really not celebrating because of the pandemic.
Right.
And I was asked to write a history of Modesto, and we have had plenty of histories of Modesto, very well written ones. And so I decided to do something different. I decided to do kind of a snapshot in time. And I realized that I couldn't write everything about all the aspects of Modesto. So I went out to various experts in town and asked them to write something about their area of expertise. And so I talked to Bob Barzan about architecture, Chris Murphy about graffiti, and folks like that. And then I also went out to photographers and artists and asked them to contribute photography and artwork. And David was one of the photographers that was gracious enough to contribute to that particular project. If you advance one more there, Linda, Michael Mangano did this particular one. It's called a ghost photograph, where you basically take a contemporary photograph and then overlay a historical photograph. So that's the corner Beatty building there, taken a couple years ago, and then of course taken in the 1950s.
And then I was impressed with a lot of the photography in there. In fact, when we did our Photo Modesto show, we did a whole presentation, a little exhibit of the photos in that book at the Gallo Center.
Yes, and it's amazing how talented the talented people we've gotten this down. Yeah. And advance one more, Linda, and you'll see that that's a photograph by James Ewing, another local person who also contributed a photograph. And then one more, and this is a painting by Tyler Absher, a local painter who contributed to the book. So we have some really talented folks in town.
Yes.
And so it was nice to be able to share that with our community and basically to tell our story, because we get maligned from time to time and unjustly, as far as I'm concerned. We have a very wonderful community with a lot of talented and caring people. And it was time that we pushed back and let people know the real story of Modesto. And this was one way for us to do that. And I'm very proud of the way it turned out. I was kind of hoping we'd do an update of it for the sesquicentennial this year, but just too many other things going on. So I'm afraid that won't happen.
It's a nice response to some of these national polls that have come out and put Modesto at the bottom of a lot of things.
Yes, and I think that's part of what prompted me at one point to start this project and write a few articles. Was people write these, provide these rankings, and they've never been here. You know, they do it based on demographics, based on numbers, and they've never spent any time in this town to really know what it's like, what the people are like. So it's really unfair to do it from a distance, and so it bothered me a little bit. Go ahead and advance one more there, Linda. So to talk a little bit about the stage plays I've worked on. The first one I did, and this is another one I kind of had been working on for years, was called My Father's House. And it's about Jonestown. And it's about a young man from Modesto who was involved with Jonestown. His name was Mike Prokes. And I went to school with Mike. He was a year ahead of me in high school. And he worked for a news station in Sacramento. And he was asked to go cover Jim Jones and People's Temple in San Francisco. And he went up there and realized that they were doing some really good work. And he decided he wanted to be a part of it. And so he became part of it and became their public relations person. And he was in Guyana when everything happened in, oh goodness, was it 89? But he survived. He escaped into the jungle and returned to San Francisco and eventually came to Modesto and held a press conference to sort of tell his side of the story and Jim Jones' side of the story. And he invited the news media to come to the old Motel 6 over on Kansas. And once he was done with his press conference, he walked into the bathroom and shot himself. And, so I wanted to kind of tell the story of what happened and why perhaps this happened. And so that was the stage play that we did. And we did a table reading at MJC with Jim Johnson and Mike Sundquist. And I had some really talented local people involved with that. Jack Souza
has it ever been produced on stage?
Never, no, we never did. We were close to doing it, but we never did mount it. And it may still happen because it's a pretty powerful piece.
It is.
So we had Jack Souza, John Mayer, Michael Lynch, Wanda Bonnell, Diane Durr, just a whole group of people that were in the stage reading. It was really, really very helpful. And another reason this particular story really needs to be told again is that it was really all about vigilance and about paying attention to things. And also the fact that everybody knows about the statement, drinking the Kool-Aid, but people forget where it comes from. And it comes from Jonestown. It comes from blind obedience. And so I wanted to be able to tell that story again. So hopefully someday that'll come together. And then the next one I worked on was called Migrant Mother. And that was about the time when Dorothea Lange met Florence Owens Thompson in a pea field in Nepoma, California, and took her photograph. And it became the iconic image of Migrant Mother, which everybody knows from the Depression. And Florence Owens Thompson was actually lived in Modesto. And so it was really a Modesto story. And she's buried at Lakewood Cemetery. And so I wanted to tell sort of the story of those two meeting and what led to how those 5 images, actually they ended up being 6, came together. And it was really a fun show to do. I did a stage reading at the Prospect Theater originally, and then we did a full production at the Prospect a few years later. And really went very well. And then I had Andrew Durr was playing the kid guitar character, who's sort of the Greek chorus. And he sang a number of songs in the show. And Don Sotero, who's a local audio engineer and music producer, decided he wanted to do a CD of those songs. And so we ended up doing that. And Andrew did it with a little help from some local musicians. And so that CD was made and came out shortly after the play. And it really is terrific. I mean, Andrew's work and Don's work was quite phenomenal. You can go ahead and advance one more. Oh, a little too far. Let's see. Yeah. So those were some of the folks that were in the play, and that's Robin Bajurka and goodness.
This was from Migrant
This
Mother.
is from Migrant Mother. Yeah. And then go ahead and go one more. This is actually a stage play that I'm working on with Arnold Schmidt called Silence is Golden. And it's about women filmmakers in the 19 teens in San Francisco. And we did a staged reading of this at MJC with Jim Johnson again and another really talented group of local actors. And this was the play that we were hoping to do another staged reading of, a table reading of actually, because we did some revisions, but the pandemic sort of put that on hold, so we're not working on that. And go ahead and advance one more. So these folks are the Maddox Brothers and Rose, and we're doing a stage play about them. They were actually from Alabama originally, and they moved to Modesto in 1930.
Wow.
And they came out during the Dust Bowl, and they were picking fruit. They were fruit tramps, moving up and down California. And one day, one of the brothers, Fred Maddox, said, "You know, I don't like doing this. Let's play music," because they were a very musical family. So he ended up talking Rice Furniture and KTRB into letting them do an hour show every morning on KTRB. And the guy who owned Rice Furniture said, "I'll put you on and you can do this if you get yourself a girl singer." And they said, "Well, we just happen to have a girl singer." And Rose was 14 years old at the time. And so the Maddox Brothers and Rose were formed. And they lived in Modesto for most of their life. And as I started to do some research on them, I didn't realize how influential they were on country music. I mean, they influenced everybody. Particularly all the women singers were influenced by Rose. And the slap bass style of Fred Maddox, actually most of the early rock and rollers attribute that to the beginnings of rockabilly and rock and roll. And so their influence was pretty amazing. So we're working on that right now, and hopefully we're going to be able to do a stage reading of that next year. So fantastic story. And then at the same time, you can go ahead and advance one more there. I've been working on screenplays for a number of years, and the one that is up, can you come back there, Linda?
We lost something
Looks
here.
like the three of us are back. Anyway, it's called Lions of Florence, and it's actually a true story about a painting competition that was staged in 1508 in Florence, Italy, and it was put on by Machiavelli, and it was featuring Leonardo da Vinci. And then Michelangelo found out that Leonardo was going to do this painting, and he said, "Well, what about me?" So Machiavelli invited Michelangelo. So there ended up being a painting competition between Leonardo and Michelangelo in the Palazzo Vecchio, Palace of the 500, in 1508. And it's a true story. It actually happened. And it was done for the Medici family. And they both actually went to cartoons, and Leonardo started doing his fresco, and he was a little ADHD, and he started to do a new technique of fresco that he had read about in Pliny the Elder, and it didn't work. All the colors ran, and it was a terrible experiment. And so he kind of walked away from it, and Michelangelo never ended up starting his. And there is a rumor that what Leonardo painted still exists, that it's still there behind a fresco and a wall that was put up by a gentleman named Vasari, who was also a great frescoist. And they believe that he revered Leonardo so much that he wouldn't have destroyed it, that he would have covered it up. And there's a gentleman in Florence, an art detective named Maurizio Serracini, who has been trying to discover if it's still there using diagnostics and some high-tech imaging. And I actually got in touch with him and got his feedback when I wrote the screenplay, and actually visited him in Florence. And he gave me a tour of the Palazzo, and we went to all the places that I talked about in the screenplay. So it's quite an interesting story. And then
Yes.
you can go one more there, Linda. And this one is another. I like historical stories and biopics. This one is actually a story about Joseph Campbell, who's a famous mythologist who wrote Hero of a Thousand Faces, which influenced a lot of screenwriters, including George Lucas. Excuse me. And Joseph Campbell came back from Europe and wanted to write short stories and live in Carmel, California. So he decided to come out to California and write short stories. So he visited a friend of his in Berkeley, California, and she said, my sister is married to this guy in Pacific Grove who's doing the same thing you are. You should go up and meet him. His name's John Steinbeck. So Campbell goes, sure, let's go. So he goes to Pacific Grove, meets John Steinbeck. Steinbeck hadn't written anything. I think he wrote A Cup of Gold in it, hadn't been published yet. So he becomes buddies with Steinbeck. Steinbeck introduces him to Ed Ricketts, the character that Doc is based on in Cannery Row, and introduces him to Carol, his wife. So Carol is basically Steinbeck's muse, typist, and the one who keeps Steinbeck from drinking beer with Ed all day long. So John's busy writing all day. So Carol's at loose ends. Joe's at loose ends. So they get together and they fall in love. And there was a real chance that Campbell was going to ruin Steinbeck's career before it even got started because of this love affair he started with Carol. But he took the high road and basically recognized how talented Steinbeck was and removed himself from the equation. And he went with Ricketts to British Columbia on a specimen finding trip, and Ricketts mentored him on mythology and all the stories that bind us together. And that basically set Campbell on what would become his career of talking about mythology and the hero's journey. And Steinbeck went back to writing and continued and wrote, all of his short stories, and then The Grapes of Wrath, and so on and so on, and had the career. But it might not have happened if Campbell hadn't stepped away. It really was a story of sort of King Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot, and Ricketts playing Merlin. It's quite an interesting story. So that's another screenplay that I've got out there. And I've written a total of 14 now that are all different genres. Some are about Modesto and the Valley, some are things like this, some are thrillers. So it's fun to do that. And I'm busy shopping those pretty much all the time.
Well, I can't wait to see this one.
Go ahead.
And actually, both of those would make great stage plays too. Sorry, David?
You've taken on some big topics. I mean,
Yeah. Well, again, I'm a history major, so that's what I like. And so then upcoming, why don't you go ahead and advance one more? And Linda will recognize this photograph because it is her photograph. The cover shot there of those incredible clouds that she took, and I asked if I could borrow because it's just beautiful. And I went out and tried to simulate it and never got close. So thank you, Linda. It's a beautiful image.
Thank you.
So this is the Flatland Chronicles, and this is will be published next year. And it's a series of very short stories called microfiction. And it's basically the Spoon River anthology, but instead of poems, it's short stories. And they're all about the Central Valley. And it's basically, most of my fiction tends to be fictional memoirs or narrative nonfiction. So it's based on reality with fictional elements worked into it. And so this will be coming out in November. And what I'd like to do, since we've got a few moments left here,
Sure.
is read a couple excerpts from that. And the first one is called The Hunter. The 17-year-old boy had never killed anything. His best friend talked him into going rabbit hunting in an uncle's vineyard. The morning of the shoot, he was given a 12-gauge shotgun, some shells, and a few words of caution, mainly to know where everyone was. He set off down a row of vines. The sun was high, and he was sweating. When the rabbit hopped into his row and stopped, he was as shocked to see the rabbit as the rabbit was to see him. He put the gun to his shoulder, aimed, clicked off the safety, and fired. When the blue haze and thunder cleared, he saw the rabbit lying there, twitching. Heart thumping, he raced to where it lay. He nudged it with his tennis shoe. It was dead. That was the last time he ever shot a living thing. That night, his father, who had joined the Marines as a 17-year-old, told him, "I'll drive you to Canada tomorrow."
Wow.
So they're all about that length.
Uh-huh.
And I have one more
That's a great
that is very personal, and there may be somebody listening tonight who will particularly enjoy this. Actually, a couple of folks. So it's called Trinity. The Joker, the musician, the cowboy, the holy and unholy Trinity. I've been fortunate to have three people in my life who I could always talk with about sports, music, and beer. My best friend George, known to some as Jorge, always the Joker. My youngest brother Wendell, better known as Stoner, the rock and roller. And my college buddy Mike, aka Gator, forever the cowboy. Anytime I wanted to catch a game, listen to a song, or sip a cold one, I could count on at least one, and sometimes all three, to be right there with me. Sadly, the legendary trio is no more. They're all gone, much too young. Now, conversations about sports, music, and beer are mostly between me, myself, and I. There are a handful of stand-ins, but it's not the same. I created a memorial video for each one. I pored over countless images and tried to select just the right songs to convey the essence of their lives, which of course involved sports, music, and beer. It was painful because I realized we wouldn't be making those memories anymore. When I finished Gator's tribute, who was the most recent to leave us, I swore it would be the last. It was just too damned hard. I said adios and happy trails to the three amigos until we meet again. So those are a couple excerpts from the Flatland Chronicles, which are that sort of
Right.
short fiction that combine fictional elements and nonfiction elements.
Makes me want to read more.
Yes, me too.
And some of those actually appeared in Modesto View. Chris Murphy was kind
right.
enough to publish a handful of these a few years back. So some of them have seen the light of day, but not all of them. But I'm very anxious to wrap it up and put it out.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the show.
Yeah.
You've written some songs. Do you have any examples of those here we could take a look at very quickly?
Oh goodness.
You want to sing one?
I'm not that much of the singer in the family. Everybody else in the family, including George and Wendell, my two sisters, Debbie and Sammy, are really the singers in the family. Let's see. Here's one. Yeah, it's called Wide Rivers. Yesterday upriver, we saw the sands were running out. We ended up together because that's what it's all about. In the serious moonlight, we tied the knot at last and vowed till death will do us. We swore to forget the past. We dreamed of the future and of what we hoped could be. We had the best intentions. We were just too blind to see. We skated round the circle like everyone else we knew. Of course, the times, they did change. And then one day we did too. We should talk it over. We should talk it through. We should talk the truth. Instead, we talk of wide rivers. And it goes on to form several more verses along those lines. But my nephew, who is a great, my whole family, it's kind of amazing. My mom and dad played music. My two sisters, my younger brother, all play music. My niece and nephew play music. My brother-in-law plays music. My best friend George plays music. And my new brother-in-law now also plays music. And that's a great story, talking about small town full circle. He was actually in the band with my friend George and Wendell that I sang with a few times called Countryside. Bruce Johnson was in that band, Skip Domingo, Phil Houghton, a couple other folks,
Right.
and a guy named Gary Hyman. And Gary's played music in town for years. Well, back then, he was in high school, and my younger sister, Debbie, and he went out a couple times. And then they went their separate ways and had their own lives. And then a couple of years ago, they reconnected. And 2 weeks ago, they got married. So Gary, who I knew as a 17-year-old and a fellow musician and songwriter, is now my brother-in-law. And I've started playing music with him and my sister. And we practiced a couple times. And once the pandemic goes away, hopefully soon, we'll be able to play some music together.
Again. Wow.
That's sweet.
Fascinating material. Makes me want to have a longer conversation with you. Some of the themes in your stories, in your plays, your screenplays, they beg for more discussion, a deeper consideration of some of those issues that you brought up. It's impressive. So, kind of sad that we're coming kind of toward the end of the show. So, we're going to get away from the deep stuff now, and I'm going to turn it over to Linda to bring some levity to the end of the program.
I was never known for my sense of humor.
Here we go. Okay.
So these are our 10 lightning questions that we like to close with.
Oh
So
boy.
first off, what sound do you like best?
The waves.
What? I'm sorry.
The waves.
Oh, okay. The waves.
Ocean waves.
Yeah. Okay. Same theme. What sound do you like the least?
Sirens.
Sirens. Okay.
If you could snap your fingers and be anywhere in space and time, where would you go?
Monterey in 1930 with John Steinbeck and Joseph Campbell. Or 1508 in Florence with Leonardo and Michelangelo. Get a first-hand report.
Yeah.
If you weren't a writer, what would you be instead?
Two things, two of my greatest frustrations.
Yeah.
A musician, a graphic designer.
Oh, all right.
And I'm an amateur at both. I dabble with both, but those, yeah. Well, three things. Going back to your opening, professional baseball player.
Okay.
I told you, multi-talented.
Yeah, really.
There you go.
What's your go-to food?
Chips and salsa.
So, if we have souls, what color is yours?
Again, you broke up.
If we have a soul, what color is yours?
Blue.
Blue. Okay.
Please finish this statement. I frequently dream about.
Ooh, I frequently dream about. Well, recently, writing.
Yeah.
And last night, I'm writing a scene. I'm writing a scene about the day the Maddox brothers and Rose had breakfast with Roy Rogers in Modesto.
Oh my gosh.
And I dreamed about that last night and wrote the scene in my dreams and wrote it down today.
Oh, that's great.
Actually happened.
Yeah. So, fame, love, or money?
Love.
Love. That's what I get from all these artists. I'm waiting to find an artist that says they want money or fame or something.
If we wanted money, we wouldn't be artists.
That's right. And if without love, the other doesn't matter.
Okay.
I agree. So, what gives you hope?
Oh, I will say what I was going to say, but it needs to be qualified. The election.
Okay. Good. We'll just leave it there.
Leave it there.
Okay. And kind of wind it up from my side. What's it going to say on your tombstone?
I actually wrote it. I've actually written my obituary already.
Wow.
And I can't remember exactly what it said because I'm going to have to go find it, but it's something to the effect of he brought people together.
Nice.
Very nice. Well, that's it, Linda, right? We've done our 10.
I think that's it. This was great. Thank you so
So
much.
anyway, thank you so much for being here. It was a real pleasure.
Well, I enjoyed it too. Thank you for asking me, and we may have a chance to revisit some of these topics down the road.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
Yeah, I look
Nice
forward
to
to
have a
that.
discussion with you about some of this stuff. So
Absolutely.
thank you. I look forward to seeing you again sometime.
All right.
Bye.
And for the people watching, we'll be back on November 8th with David Chapman talking about his strummed instruments, I believe. So thank you and good night.
Good night.